Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Today I will give a presentation which about the editing for the web. And when the World Wide Web arrived in 1994, newspapers and broadcast stations began putting their content online. And now, more than 20 years have passed as the internet has evolved. Online journalism has become more and more sophisticated, and so how editors' views of what they are doing. Let's see some changes which web has to bring into journalism. The first point is stories. As we can see, good web editors now understand that most stories, at least major stories, should not appear on the web exactly as they appeared in print. That's different. So such stories often should be broken into pieces so that the main story is accompanied by sidebars. Besides the main stories, the dumping print stories onto the web may be acceptable for brief stories, although even then the headline must be rewritten to allow search engines to find them. And the second point is the advertisement. The number of online users has a huge increase, and they tend to be younger. So for them, they are attractable by the web's informal language. And the third part is the change of audience. As we can see, today's news customers want to talk back to the providers of their news, and they want to participate in discussion about the events of the day. And in the next part, compare with the traditional news media, today's news sites on the web are increasingly likely to there are 5 points. For example, publish massive amounts of information that has little to do with news or broader public issue, and adopt the points of view of the groups being covered, and then provide contents for service decided solely to selling, provide a sale to members service independent for all the newspaper brand. Service that may appeal to people who don't like newspapers. They are new customers. Current amounts of editorial honor to the readers themselves. different from the traditional one-way communication. Today's world, the environment has changed, and journalists must adapt to it. And then let's say layers. We know well space is variable, unlimited in the online media, but web stories still need layers. They provide 7 points about layers. For an online article, they usually have the headline or title, and one sentence text or lead, and in the first page or a quick summary of what happened, like the 5 words and 1 each, not likely a short radio or television stories. Usually in the online article, they have months of photos or graphics. You can also provide audio and video, and the in-depth often broken with subheadings. At least at the end of the article, the editors always provide links to related material. We can see this picture from Online Star. In the bottom of this article, there are related news. If you are interested, you can see more about this topic. So as a conclusion, layers and links make editing for the online media different. Layering makes it simple for readers to consume as little or as much. Links provide access to increasable depths that far exceed what newspaper or magazines can offer. So for the online journalism is a multimedia journalism. The journalist is required to select the best medium, text, graphics, photos, audio, or video. And online editors must be careful to use information only from reliable sources, providing web links to reliable sources. And there provide some suggestions for the online editors. When they're editing online news, before using information from a web, you should variety it with the sources. You can find the second sources such as a book or another content person. Before you put it on the website, omit the information. And information take direct from the web and used in a story must be attractable for audience. The third point is information from the web and used in a story must be trackable. You can use the name of a copyright holder or government agency in your article. For example, like the word according to the Xinhua News Agency or Xinhua News Agency figures show. Also, please check the extension on the SAS internet address to get clues as to the nature of the organization and the likely slant of the information. Be careful. Don't use information from the homepage without the person's permit. And also, please don't use information from any organizations without verifications. So, and in the last, please check the date when the page was last updated. There are also some other sources of information. You can get information from consumer database service, also include the government database, special internet group database, and internet search engines, also other computerized database, which include like the electronic libraries. And for the online editor, what editors do for when they preparing news stories, because there is a deadline every minute for online editor. Online media editor are a kind of multimedia journalist who must be good at using computers. Online editors need to be comfortable with both writing and technology. An online editor is also to build whatever software or publishing tool in required to the needed commercial. It also include video, pictures, or something else. And then for an online editor, they might also need to be comfortable with gathering and analyzing website data. Unlike the normal writers and editors who work in print, an online editor might need to track what kinds of stories generate more traffic to info the current or future stories. So, in other words, an online editor needs to be comfortable paying attention to traffic status and incorporating lessons learning from those statistics during the content current process. So we know how online editors designing for a web. Here are some key tips on how to design web pages and pictures. Like keep the design consistent among the pages on your site, and please put the most important part, the most important information at the top of the page. It's valuable for readers to read it. And also break up the tab with block content cushions, subheadings, and balance list. And limited the amount of scrolling a reader has to do by using internet links to take readers to pay more attention to your article. And you can also use web source to copy coding for other website page if you like. And then you as a online editor, you have lots of fonts, but it doesn't mean you should use all of them on your web page. Also, flashing tab is okay for your website. Please don't use color tab against a background it will blend with. Let's imagine if you have yellow tab and you have a blue background, no one can see your content. Also, stick to the color Internet Explorer users. Please don't use background colors that will make it hard to users to read your article. Lots of sounds and emotions, and also like photos and big photos, they will make your page slow to download, and the people will not see your website. Also about the photos, save photos in JPG format, graphics in GIF format. At the last part, let's see the online media and its future. The web is, we can know the internet, the web is the most important medium for printing news now, and it also allowed readers to access database and deliver any kinds of information, including text, audio, video, and graphics. No source's new medium could exist without a close content to the internet. And this is content editing for the web. Let's see some questions. The first one, where should we put our most important information at your web page? And the answer is A, at the top. And question 2, which one thing? The answer is A, is true. This sentence is true. And the third one, electronic libraries information can't be used for online editing. Which one will you choose? Electronic libraries is false, because electronic libraries belongs to other computerized database. So that's all my presentation about news editing, online news editing.
you. She did a very complete, she covered a lot of detail there. And it is important, I mean, it kind of dovetails with what I was saying earlier. If you're going to succeed in moving a print product to the internet, you need to be offering a lot more than what you're offering off the internet. And you have the ability of doing it by linking, by multimedia, all these things, and at the same time, one of the things I've already mentioned, I think, in previous classes, is you have to think about the advertisers, offer more to the advertisers as well, such as, again, like the magazine we're looking at, Wired, they did 360s and stuff. The prediction is within the next 2 years, about 75% of all online advertising is going to be what they call native advertising. In other words, it's going to be like story advertising. They're going to be telling stories and showing video about their companies and stuff like that. And that's exactly what they're able to do online that they can't do offline. So they actually have the capability of doing more for their advertisers online than they could ever think about doing in print, but they still haven't done it, and they're losing help by not doing it. They're losing money by not doing it. Okay, well, you're already on. I'll put this in here, and thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Before I start, I want to share one picture with you. Yeah, that's the script we wrote in our ENT class, and I guess everyone was struggling at the time. So basically, writing or editing the news script is not easy, especially for the television. As we know, TV and radio journalists, they need to master many of the same skill as print journalists, but also video and audio editing of recorded or live broadcasts. So today I will give you some tips on writing and editing the broadcast news. And yeah, now let's proceed to the first part. What are the requirements for broadcast news writing? The first one, broadcast news should be written and edited so newscaster can read it conversationally, so it sounds natural to the listeners and it should talk. So look at the word conversationally and talk. They mean that we need to write concisely so that listener can immediately understand or and pay full attention of it, just like the daily conversation. So how to be sound like we are talking? So just use the present tense or present perfect tense. For example, the Iraq government has rejected claims from an international human rights group, and that's the present perfect tense. And the next one, a former Russian security agent remains in a serious condition. That's the present tense. So those tenses replace the word today and to give listener a sense of the freshness, and it is happening right now. The next one, the lead on broadcast story should function like a newspaper headline to attract readers and let them know what's to come. So this point emphasized the lead, just like the headline of the newspaper as the part of the warming element. It should grab readers' attention, and it should deliver the general information at first, then talk more about the details later. So let's look at the example. The New York stock market took a sharp loss after backing away from an early rise. Trading was active. Volume was 15,950,000 shares compared with 16,740,000 Friday. So this lead is state that the stock market is at a loss at first and then give the exact number to elaborate it. So the next one, The newscast should be arranged using transitions that help listeners shift gears. Linking different types of news is need to use with ideas and skillful organization of facts, not just simply with catch phrases like the other news. It will be jarring sometimes with linking tragic stories and entertainment story. It will that the audience feels like it is just not natural. Okay, the next one. The broadcast story should complement, nor merely repeat what's obvious from any accompanying sound clips or video. Yeah, broadcast news is the marriage of words to picture, words to sounds, and picture to sound. It should prepare viewers for what they are about to see, or specify what may be difficult to see. So like the we are now looking at, or the picture shows, and they are not recommended. So these are the requirements for writing broadcast news, and usually written copy for the broadcast news comes from local reporters and news gathering association. And most broadcast news is added by trained reporters before it is broadcasted. So in the next part, I want to give you 4 tips on the preparation of news copy. The first one, all editing of broadcast copy is done with ease of reading for the newscaster in mind. So look at the script. It has 3 words in the first and second line, and 4 words in the third lines. So basically, average only 4 words per line can make newscaster easier to read. Their eyes don't need to travel distance back and forth across the teleprompter in this way. And the next one, all the copy should be triple spaced in capital and lowercase letter. More than this, if a letter correction is to made in a word, the word should be scratched out and the correct word substituted in printed letters. Well, if word changes are made within sentences, then the editor needs to read it to double check. And if the copy requires more extra editing, then just correct the old one and print the new one to the newscaster. And yeah, the next one is news editors put each story on separate sheet. So the separate sheets will let editors more flexible to rearrange or delete and add if there is no time for it in the broadcasting. And the next one, properly edited broadcast copy also should include pronunciation aids when necessary. For example, the name of place may be tricky to some newscaster. Different regions might have different pronunciations. So it is necessary for editor to add the phonetic spelling to script to help newscaster to take note, like the cat, or the arm, or the cow, etc., etc. Okay, after discussing a few tips on writing and editing broadcast news, I think we should know more about the broadcast style so that we can write better and edit better to match the phenomenon. So let's look at abbreviation first. Usually, abbreviation will not be used in the radio and television news copy, except for the common use, like the Dr. Smith, or the name like the UN, FBI. Those names are more familiar with their full name. And the acronym, like the NATO, and the time AM, PM, and PhD, those academic degrees. And the punctuation. So instead of common, you should use dash or serious dots. Like this is to indicate that here is a pause that a newscaster can catch a breath. For example, the House plans to give $11,500,000 measure to a final vote Tuesday. ... And it can be more easily to see, and you can pause more easily, I think. And then you, like the FBI, hyphen instead of the period of initials. And the next one, use contractions, like isn't, doesn't, or is. However, when it comes to, if you want to emphasize the verb, especially for the negative, like she does not choose to run is better than she doesn't choose to run. Then we have the third element, figures. So sometimes a million may be heard as the 8 million. Therefore, to avoid to be misheard, 1 million would be better than a million. And in most copy, round numbers mean as much as specific figures. So almost a mile would be better compared with 5,200 feet. So it will be clearer to listener. But when referring to the voting result, the figure should be specific, of course. And when write the fractions and decimal, and numbers under 10 and over 999, or the smaller number when two numbers occur together, or the number at the beginning of the sentence, they should be spelled out. And when writing the time of the day, dates and address, or years, then we can just use figures directly. And now we come to the last part, the title. The identification or title prepares the ear for the name. Therefore, the identification usually precedes the name, like the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and middle initials and ages of persons seldom appear. So, yep, I've talked a lot of the broadcast news. Now it's the time to reflect some points of today. So let's do it together. In television, especially, use of the present and present perfect tenses often helps downplay the time element. True or false? Yeah. It is true, and like I just mentioned, these two tenses can provide listener or viewers a sense of the event happens recently, and it happens today. And the next, all editing of broadcast copy is done with ease of reading for the newscaster in mind. True or false? Yeah. Years and usually the words per line. Usually, there will be no more than 4 words per line. So that's the one. Usually, what kind of figure should be spelled out? A, time of the day. B, dates and addresses. C, years. D, numbers under 10 and over 999. Yeah. A, B, C can use figures directly. So, yep, that's all I have today, and we covered the writing and editing and some styles of the broadcast news, and I hope you learned something from it. Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, if you have not already, be sure that presenters, please send me a copy of your PowerPoint if you haven't saved it to the desktop or something. 'Cause I need to let up and look. Yesterday I passed out some of the papers that I graded, but there are no names on them because I didn't put names on them, and you guys didn't do it for me. So they're just numbers to me. So it was a blind grade, no idea who did what. But that also means I have to just pass them around as I did yesterday for you to pick up your paper if you have one here. As I explained in the lecture yesterday, I did those of you who got a grade through Moodle, if they sent you a grade about a week ago or so, then you're not going to have a paper here. I did that electronically. I didn't print out your paper for you. But as of a few days ago, maybe as soon as about Wednesday or Thursday, I did decide I needed to just print out the papers of those I hadn't graded yet. It was faster for me to grade a printed copy than it was for me to try to do it electronically, just partly because it's kind of hard. I need to take notes and stuff as to how you did in this or that or the other, and you need to be able to see it visually as I put it into a grade. As I showed yesterday, I don't have a marker for the board today, but again, for those that were not there yesterday to understand this, I went in order, and so you might on your paper see something like it start off with D, and I have a grade on D, and that's design, so that's out of 25. And then G for graphics, and that you see a grade, and that's out of 20, according to our critique sheet. And then you have an H for headlines, and that's out of 25 possible, and you'll see a grade for that. And then you have T for text, which is next in our critique sheet, and you'll see a grade out of 20 in that one, and then the last one is E for editing, and you'll see a grade out of 10 for that one. So that's what the numbers mean on this, and so I'll start that around along with I forgot to say I didn't bring my class folder, I forgot about that, and so I just have to just sign your name here. I may still, next week, yeah, I've got to transfer it over to this, to the sheet itself. Okay, next. I thought our presentation and broadcasting was good as far as the content was very good. Do pay some attention to that. She had a lot of information that she presented to us, and it's on her PowerPoint. So do pay attention to that. That sounds like something that I might put into a test, or at least a quiz. Okay. In this class, we're kind of mostly emphasizing print, but obviously, even as I've been talking this morning, the typical editor, the typical journalist is going to have to be multimedia. One thing that I have. When you do that. Okay. One thing I have mentioned before, but maybe you didn't pay attention to, some of the things I've taught you about news writing is for print. One major difference in news writing, I've been trying to teach you to put the attribution at the end of the sentence as often as possible, with the exception of an indirect quote, because there aren't quote marks and it's not real obvious real quickly who's saying something. With indirect quotes, you put the attribution at the beginning. That's for print. But for broadcast, you almost always put the source at the beginning. It's almost all type 1. Because you're letting the person know immediately, the audience know immediately who's saying something. But now they can't see quote marks. And they're not going to say quote end quote sort of stuff. They don't do that. So, so you have, besides the things that were mentioned in this last presentation, that's one of the other things that is different about writing for broadcast as to writing for print. With print, we're trying to emphasize, because we have quote marks, we're trying to emphasize what was said and then who said it. But since there are no quote marks in broadcast, as I said, almost everything's type 1 with the attribution at the beginning, just the nature of the medium. So be aware that there's a difference. You don't write the same for print as you do with broadcast. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone. The topic I present today is editing for style, spelling, and tightening. Style means correct styles means writing something that matches the way your local or right service style book say is correct. And by far the main style book American journalists need to study and learn is the one published by the Associated Press, like this one. And United Press International and Reuters also publish a style book, and many large newspapers have their own. Some newspapers, such as the New York Times. And I want to cover 5 elements in the style. The first one is the abbreviations and symbols. And there are 3 points you need to mention. The first one is the days of the week are never abbreviated. Like this one. And the second one is the months are abbreviated only when followed by a date during the months. Like February 2nd, we abbreviated to FEB.2 at least. And the months with 5 letters or less are not abbreviated, including March, April, May, June, and July. And the second one is always write out percent rather than using a symbol, except in headline if the space is tight. Like this one, a bomb erases 60% of Hiroshima. And for this one, the 59% of you will share this article without even reading it. There is no enough space to write out the word percent. Okay, the second one is the capitalization. And the first rules we need to obey is the common nouns are lowercase, like dog, apple, a tree, yellow, a red. And proper nouns are uppercase, like the fiddle and seers. The third one is the actual names of the races are capitalized, but colors not. Like Malay and Chinese, American need to capitalize. But we need to be careful with the word black. Mainstream media in America will replace the word black to African American to avoid racial discrimination problem. Okay, and the last point I want oddly is the AP lowercase is pronounced for God or Jesus, but capitalized Mass and Communion. It capitalized Pope only in front of the Pope's name. Okay, the third part is the numbers. Generally speaking, the numbers 0 through 9 are written out, and the numbers 10 above are written as numerals. Expectations to general rule about numbers. Use numerals even if less than 10 with addresses, ages, clothes size, days, dimensions, money, percentages, receipt amounts, speeds, temperatures, times, weights, and years. And the fourth part is the quotation. It is important that the reader always be clear who is saying what. Every paragraph needs to be attributed, but every quote doesn't as long as it's clear who said it. Provide you 3 sentences. The wrong one is the privacy is our most cherished right. We need to make it right is the lower 2 version. The first one is the Peter said privacy is our most cherished right. And the second one is Peter said it is important to protect citizens' privacy. It is our most cherished right. And whenever more than one person is quoted in a story, attribution is required, and it should be placed in front of the quotation whenever the speaker being quoted changes. This is important so the reader doesn't think it is the same person speaking. When there is only one speaker, it is not necessary to put an attribution with every sentence quoted as long as it is clear the same person is speaking. Like the sentences below. This type of valuation isn't based on a score, he said. It is based on ideas and areas that should be addressed. You need to notice that it is clear the same person is saying the second sentence, even without another he said, which would only seem redundant. We need to need to be careful with the word said or said. The first rules we need to obey is the reporters should stick to one tense in attributions, either said or says throughout, but not both. And the order should usually be source said, not said source. Like this type of evaluation isn't based on a score. Peter said, and not said Peter. And journalists prefer said and says to other attributions because of their brevity and neutrality. And you need to avoid attributions that imply mind reading, such as saying that someone believes, doubts, feels, hopes, or thinks something. And we usually use said in the hard news and use say in the feature stories. And the last part is the miscellaneous. I want to cover 2 parts. The first one is the time. So do not write yesterday or tomorrow, but you may write today or tonight, this morning, this afternoon, or this evening if you mean the day of publications. But be careful, however, not to write today to refer to something you are writing today, but that won't be printed until the next day. And the second one is address. Words like street, avenue, boulevard, drive, and lane are always written out when a specific address is not given. If an address is given, then the words street, avenue, and boulevard are only 3 such words abbreviated. And the second thing I want to present is the spelling. Average readers may not know when an editor misses a style book mistake so long as the article isn't in consonance with itself. But spelling mistakes like ones with grammar and usage are ones that readers do catch, and when they do, the credibility of the publication goes down in their minds. They think, if I cannot trust this website to spell it right, why should I trust it to get the facts right? And the following is the most commonly misspelling words. Remembering to click on the spell checker or looking up the word processors automatically highlights as a good start, but dictionaries vary, and no word processing program follows the procedure journalists use. And the last part I want to say is about the tightening. Tightening means a few words may say a lot and a lot of words may say little. And these are 3 rules we need to obey. The first one is that short sentences generally are easier to read than long ones. The second one is short words are easier to understand than long ones. And the third one is familiar. Conventional words are easier to understand than others. The average newspaper readers reads the newspaper for only 22 to 24 minutes a day. The average broadcast story lasts 30 seconds or less. The average website reader doesn't want to waste time scrolling through a story that is longer than it needs to be. So don't waste your audience time with unnecessary words. Get to the point as quickly as possible, conveying as much news as you can within the time the reader, viewer, or listener spends with you. And we need to cut any word that wouldn't change the meaning of sentence if they were gone. I'll provide you 3 sentences. The first one is from one week to the next. This one is Esther went from being the goal to hero. The word being there can be deleted. The second one is entry shot from the top of the box, and in an instant the ball ripped into the upper right corner of the net. The word in an instant can be deleted. The third one is the mayor read from a prepared statement. The word prepared can be deleted. And we also need to cut unnecessary facts. News presents the pertinent facts. Every story should answer all the questions the reader or viewer expect answered. If a big story returns after having been out of the news, it should contain a short background or reminder. Readers don't carry clips to check background. And substitute fewer words for more if they mean the same thing. The word applying its stamp of approval is too wordy, and the concise version is approving. And work in field also means field work. The field is 50 feet in length also means the field is 50 feet long. And I will provide you 2 questions. The first question is, which sentence is correct? The first one is, he was the first Pope to visit the White House. The second one is, in 1968, Pope Paulo VI arrived in Colombia for the start of the first papal visit to Latin America. The second sentence is wrong because we need to capitalize the Pope before a real name. And the second question is, this short phrase, wrote a formal letter to resignation, is too wordy, and we need to write it in a concise version. Please resign. Okay, that's all. Thank you. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Okay, so just a couple of comments on that. Two items that were mentioned and kind of in passing, you might not have even noticed them, I don't know, but one of the things it said was that in your attribution, try to keep the natural word order, which is like he said, she said, and not said he or said Jones or whatever. And that's true most of the time, but there are exceptions. For example, one of the things you try to do to cut down the number of sentences you have and simplify things is to use more parenthetical information. So, for example, rather than having a complete sentence, let's say I'm talking at this conference last weekend or whatever. Instead of having a complete sentence saying that Harvey is a professor at Chapman University, you stick that in parenthetically in another sentence. So maybe Harvey said that most advertising in the future will be native advertising. Okay, take off the term. Most advertising in the future will be native advertising. Harvey said, unless you're going to add the parenthetical information, then you said Harvey, who is a professor at Chapman University. So when you flip it around, normally you should have a reason to flip it around. And if you didn't flip it around, if you said Harvey said, who is a professor at university, doesn't sound right. Harvey, who is a professor at Chapman University, said, that doesn't sound right. And so if you're trying to add some parenthetical information, and in order to cut down and simplify your writing and not have complete sentences about background information that doesn't need a complete sentence, then you flip the word order around, said Harvey, who is a professor at Chapman University. So that's when you would flip it around. So normally, I do see a lot of that, and even myself, sometimes I'm not thinking and I say said Harvey or whatever, but you should normally use the right word order, Harvey said, unless, the main exception I can think of is if there's something you're going to add parenthetically that just doesn't sound right if you don't flip the word order of said Harvey and then put in your additional information. The other thing was when to say said or says. It made note that you should stay the same. That you should either go present tense or past tense, in other words, with your attribution word, with said or says. There's also, actually I found, and I've used present tense for a lot of my career because I've been with weekly newspapers or even monthly magazines, stuff like that. And so in that situation, I'm trying to, as we've talked about before, I'm trying to hide my date. So kind of as was said with broadcasting, I'm trying to kind of cover up when an interview took place because the interview might be a week old and I'm competing against a daily newspaper. I don't want to say that when the interview took place. And so because of that, I use present tense. Now, however, you can also do it, you can make that transition in one place. You can start with a lead that uses present tense, but then as soon as you mention a date or a place, in other words, a time or a location, now you have to flip immediately to past tense. So you might frequently see in my writing my lead being present tense, and then usually paragraph 2 is my complete lead, and that's usually where I'm going to say when or where something happened. And so almost immediately then, and by the second or third paragraph, I flip to past tense. So the lead could be present tense and the rest of the story past tense is what I'm saying. It can go pretty easily. That transition can be made very easily. Because also, if you're trying to make your lead short, and what I've told you is I want it less than 35 words, if you're trying to make your lead short, you can't cover all 5 W's and keep it short. And so you're not even going to say probably when or where something happened in the first paragraph. Sometimes you might, but those are 2 of the things you can very frequently leave to paragraph 2, is when and where. And so if you're leaving when and where to paragraph 2, it almost sounds a little bit odd not to use present tense. Because once you say said, you feel compelled to say when somebody said it, if you haven't already established that. So in order to avoid saying when something happened, and leaving that, in order to keep your lead trimmed down to the fewest words possible, then for both reasons, because when you say said, you almost have to say, once you go to past tense, you almost have to identify when it was done, when it was said. You want to delay that, so you're pushing that into paragraph 2. And then when you say it, that's when you naturally have to go to past tense. You can't say a date and place without going to past tense. So I know some of you have had a hard time with that, but if you work at it a little bit, you can kind of see how easy that is and why you need to do it that way. But anyway, to keep things short in the lead, even if you're going to go past tense, even in most of the story, you can still go present tense in the lead, especially with, now excuse me, when I say that though, I'm only talking about the attribution. I'm not talking about, some of you have tried to sneak in other verbs in present tense. No. I'm only talking about the attribution. And so don't try to make other verbs, now verbs of attribution, yeah. You know, if you're saying explains instead of says, yeah, that's still an attribution verb. But I'm saying, action verbs like runs or, what's another, holds or something like that. I mean, verbs that are not attribution verbs, you're going to have to go past tense if it's a past event, in which case that's also going to drag your attribution into the past as well. But anyway, all that to just say that it is possible to start with present and go to past in your verb of attribution. But you have to be careful with it. And that again will depend then, if you're going to use present tense attribution in your lead, you cannot say when and where. You can't put the when and where elements in your lead. You have to hold those for paragraph 2. Then flip to past tense if you're going to do that. Okay, is there another presentation today? I said there were a possibility of 4, but not necessarily, people didn't necessarily sign up for 4. So I think, do any of you have any questions about anything? I know I gave you until Thursday morning to finish a lot of people are handing in their next assignment, their tabloid. But I did give you until Thursday morning if you haven't done that yet. And that's, I wanted to be able to pass out my critiques before you had to hand that in so you could make adjustments. People had asked me last week, when am I going to get my grade? When are you going to tell me what I did wrong? And I agreed, I needed to do that. So that plus, well, I didn't know if I was going to be sick yesterday, but nonetheless, she thought she was going to be busy yesterday and would not be able to hold her tutorial, well, her open lab time. And so once she told me she didn't think she'd be able to hold open labs, and that also just made me think, even though I held open lab last night and hardly anybody came, 2 people came, it still made me think that I maybe needed to give you a little more time in order to make sure you had adequate time, adequate access to the lab to do your work. So for a couple of reasons, I went in and postponed the deadline. This week, as I was telling one of you already, I will try to get your final grades in your major project 1 done. You saw an original grade for part of it, but I'm going to try. I'll again be staying up late to try to finish all the grading for that major project 1, and also your PowerPoints. Since we're getting close to the end of all the PowerPoints, I need to be submitting all of those, and I should have been doing that as I went along, but again, I just get overwhelmed by the number of students in this class. So this week, my hope is that by the end of the weekend, I will have both your final major project 1 grade in and your PowerPoint grade in. I've got to type, I wrote it out on pages and stuff, but I need to put it into the system. And then I'll get started on your tabloid grading. I'll probably do that while I'm in Arizona. So anyway, any other questions that I can answer for you? Again, as I was saying in our class yesterday, you are pretty much, there's not much of a critique sheet for magazines because it's too creative, there's too much variation from magazine to magazine. I mean, unless you just do some dumb stuff, that you should know better than. It's not the same style, not the same layout as a newspaper. So when you start working in that, this A4 size, just use the standard A4 size on that. There's obviously lots of different sizes of magazines. There are some that are, well, even the magazine that I'm still involved with is tabloid in size. So that's a fairly large size magazine, but there are magazines in America still, I'm not sure which ones still exist, but Life and Look magazines were two that were in a larger format, bigger than A4. Magazines like Time, Time magazine and stuff like that are kind of around A4 sort of size. Reader's Digest is half that size in its dimensions. So, there's no standard in even the size of a magazine, but we will use A4 just to keep that standard. The question was asked yesterday, and not all of you were there, whether I wanted you to do a front cover to your magazine. And as I told them yesterday, that would be like extra credit. If somebody really feels inspired, they want to do a front page. It's not, you don't need to do a front page to get an A. I'm primarily going to be grading based on, you'll do probably 2 stories over 4 to 5 pages. So you will have no more than 5 pages, which means if you ran out of space, if you don't have room for a complete story, you just have to cut the story. I don't want more than 5 pages. So 4 or 5 pages. So one story can be on 2 pages and one will be 3 pages, basically. You probably don't want to combine, have part of 2 stories on 1 page. You want to try to avoid that. Probably your best story is going to be the first one. And your first page might be all mostly a piece of art. For your very first page might be a piece of art with the title of your first story. So it's not really a front page of a magazine, but it is your front page. And so, and as we've seen, a lot of magazines dedicate almost a full page to a picture and the title and byline and stuff before they actually get into the text. You could start it on your first page if you want to, but I think if you have a decent photo, and if you don't have one, I would again suggest you try to get one for your first story, that you want to make your first page pretty impressive. And ideally, that means using a big photo on your first page. Whether or not you start your story on your first page is up to you, but you want a good piece of art on your first page. If you can find one that you can put a title over the photo, that's again more magazine style. You might want to try to do that if you can. But again, if you just don't have the art, don't force it. Don't try to force a title over a picture that just doesn't have room for the picture. It doesn't have, the one I used had all that sky over the mountains. That was very easy to put a title over that. But I can envision taking some photos here on campus where I would have enough background to put a title over it. You have to be able to envision that. You have to be able to think about what kind of picture would you need to have a clear space where you can put a title over it. I can see some pictures taken from the swimming pool height of the B1 building, taking down on something where you'd have enough background to put a title over it, for example. Here on campus, that's, you'd have, I can see some others shooting across the lake towards the buildings, or, the new construction, or the other direction towards these buildings, or whatever you're trying to do your story on. Or one from here shooting back at B1 building for whatever reason. There are ways to take a picture here where you can have some space in your picture for a title over the picture. But you're going to have to be somewhat creative in how to do it. I can think of some also in a basketball court. There are ways to do it. But again, don't force it. Don't try to put a bunch of words over something that has over a photo that has lots of content on that photo, and it's really hard to do it in a way that's does justice to the photo and does justice to the title. That would be harder. So, nonetheless, and my point is make your first page impressive. That should be your most impressive page, should be your first page of your 4 or 5 pages. So if your first page is mostly art, is mostly a photo or something, then it's very likely that you'll need the next 2 pages to do your story. Now, that doesn't mean you don't put any art on the other stories, but on the other pages, but those pages can have smaller art on them. And then that leads you then to your second story. And so your second story, you may not have as big a piece of art as you start that story because you just don't have enough room. But that doesn't mean you can't use even up to half of that, of the page, we could say page 4, possibly, for a picture leading into that story. But in order to have much of a story, you're probably going to have to put some of the story of that second story on what I would consider probably to be page 4, and then finish it on page 5. Do you follow all that? So page 1 is going to be mostly picture, I would think, if you can possibly find a good picture for page 1, for your page 1. Page 2 and 3 would be mostly story with some art on them for your story 1. Page 4 would be maybe half of a page being art, but you're going to probably have to start your second story on page 4 and finish it on page 5. Well, that's the way I would envision it. You might come up with something different, but I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what I would think would make sense for your magazine pages. So as I said, really a lot of way I'm going to grade your magazine will be, does it look good? You know, I mean, obviously spelling and grammar in the headlines and the titles obviously will be important. If you screw that up, there'll be major deduction for that. But by now you've had quite a bit of time to work on your stories, and you only have to choose your 2 best ones for your magazine. So you don't need all the stories you had before. So you're getting down to where you can be pretty selective. Which stories do I have that have the best art, that are the most interesting, whatever, and use those 2 stories for your magazine. And so that gives you a little more latitude in what to include. And again, you should be thinking very hard about, creating a design that will look nice. As I mentioned yesterday, one of the first videos I had you watch about Quark talked about how to do a cutout. I don't think I'm going to have time to teach how to do a cutout in class, particularly since I'll be gone for a week. So if you want to try a cutout, which is something that a lot of magazines would do, you need to watch that video. I say it's one of those first Quark videos I asked you to watch. And so if you watch them, you should remember which one to watch. I think it actually has it in the title, something about cutouts. But so then, wrapping around, it'll teach you how to wrap around a cutout and so forth in that video. As I confessed yesterday, I don't remember having ever done a cutout in Quark. I've done it with InDesign, I've done it with PageMaker, but I don't, and probably with Ventura Desktop Publishing before that. But I think in my years working with Quark, decades ago now, I don't think I ever had we were doing basic news pages and we weren't doing cutouts. So I don't remember ever doing a cutout when I was using Quark back in around 1990 or something like that when I was using Quark before. So I would have to go watch the video again just to make sure. But it wasn't that long a video, or at least the portion covering that doesn't take much time, but somebody just has to go look at it, watch it, and play with it a little bit. Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, then you can take off if you're done with your work, or if you have work to do here, I'll stay around. If you still haven't handed in your tabloid and want me to take a look at it, I'll be available to take a quick glance at it and give you some feedback. Obviously, I can't spend a lot of time with any one, but I can spend a few minutes with, and I will stay here as long as people want me to, give them some attention. So, so class time is over, and you can leave or stay and continue working or have me look, whatever you need. Okay, thank you.